Across the globe, remnants of ancient civilizations continue to challenge our understanding of history. From massive stone structures that defy logic to artifacts whose purpose remains a mystery, these discoveries hint at knowledge and craftsmanship far beyond what we can fully explain today. Some have baffled scientists for decades, while others were only recently unearthed, revealing puzzles that raise more questions than answers. In this video, we journey through 24 of the most intriguing archaeological finds, exploring their stories, the people who uncovered them, and the unanswered questions that continue to haunt researchers. As we move from one enigmatic site to the next, the line between history and the unexplained blurs, inviting you to witness wonders that have quietly withstood the test of time and secrets that may never be solved. Antikythera mechanism. The story of the Antikythera mechanism begins beneath the waters off a small Greek island, where divers searching for sponges in 1900 stumbled upon a shipwreck that had lain untouched for centuries. Scattered across the seabed were statues, pottery, and jewellery, all belonging to a vessel that sank in the 1st century BCE. Among these treasures rested a corroded lump of bronze and wood, so unremarkable that it was set aside for months before anyone thought to look closer. The object was eventually recognized as something extraordinary only when fragments split apart, revealing hints of unnatural precision inside the corrosion. When archaeologists began examining the fragment in 1902, they were startled to see tiny gear teeth emerging from the corroded surface. Some fragments even showed traces of carefully engraved Greek letters, hinting that the device carried instructions or labels for its intricate parts. The Greek archaeologist Valerios Stais was the first to suggest that it might be some kind of astronomical instrument. His claims seemed outrageous at the time. Nothing from the ancient world had ever shown such mechanical complexity, and many scholars doubted that people more than 2,000 years ago could have produced anything resembling clockwork machinery. Decades passed with little progress in understanding the strange object, now called the Antikythera mechanism, after the island near which it was found. Conservators carefully cleaned its surfaces, revealing fragments of dials, inscriptions, and interlocking gears. Yet, the corrosion and damage were so extensive that no one could be certain of how the pieces once fit together. For much of the 20th century, it remained a puzzle hidden inside a corroded shell, its secrets just out of reach. A breakthrough came in the 1970s when advanced imaging techniques allowed researchers to see beyond the surface corrosion. Alongside the gears, faint spirals and scale marks suggested the presence of dials designed to track cycles far longer than a single year. X-rays revealed more than 30 separate bronze gears, many with delicate triangular teeth, cut so precisely they rivaled those of modern machines. Some of the gearing ratios matched known astronomical cycles so closely that researchers realized the maker had worked with advanced mathematical models, not just observation. The discovery stunned historians of science, forcing them to reconsider the technological capabilities of ancient Greece. Whoever built the device had not only mastered fine metalwork, but also understood complex astronomical cycles. Careful study revealed that the mechanism could track the movements of the sun, the moon, and possibly even the planets. It appeared to predict lunar eclipses and follow the irregular path of the moon through the sky. The gears could be turned by a hand crank, setting the dials in motion and simulating the passage of time. Some inscriptions even included references to the Olympic Games, suggesting that the mechanism might have been used to mark the dates of important cultural events. Despite these advances, many questions remain unanswered. No other device like it has ever been found in the ancient world, making it a solitary relic of technology far ahead of its time. Was it a one-of-a-kind masterpiece, created by a genius artisan, or part of a larger tradition of devices now lost to history? Scholars have speculated about links to known figures such as Archimedes, yet no direct evidence connects the mechanism to any single inventor. Fragments of the mechanism continue to yield new surprises. In 2005, researchers used three-dimensional X-ray scans and surface imaging to read inscriptions invisible to the naked eye. The hidden texts gave instructions for the device, describing its functions in language both technical and poetic, Yet even these inscriptions did not explain everything. Parts of the mechanism remain missing, and debates continue over whether it once included additional planetary dials or functions that can only be guessed at today. The Antikythera mechanism has changed how historians view the ancient world. It suggests that Hellenistic Greece possessed a level of mechanical knowledge thought to have developed only 1,000 years later in medieval Europe. Its existence raises unsettling questions. If one such device survived, how many others might have been built, and how much knowledge was lost when the ship carrying it sank beneath the waves? It remains an enigma, a device whose silent gears continue to suggest that ancient knowledge once reached further than we can fully grasp. Plain of Jars, Laos. Scattered across the rolling hills of northern Laos lies a site that seems both ordinary and otherworldly. Thousands of massive stone jars resting silently on the grass. Some stand taller than a person, others lie tipped on their sides, their wide mouths gaping open toward the sky. From a distance, they look like remnants of some forgotten industry, yet no modern explanation fits. Their sheer size and number transform the landscape into a riddle carved in stone. When French researcher Madeleine Kalani first studied the jars in the 1930s, she catalogued hundreds of them, spread across dozens of sites. Some were grouped in clusters, while others stood alone on ridges or clearings. Each one weighed several tons, and many were hollowed from single blocks of sandstone, granite, or limestone. Local legends offered different stories. Some said the jars were made by giants who used them to brew rice wine, while others believed they were funerary vessels meant to hold the dead. Neither account could be confirmed, leaving scholars to sift through fragments of evidence scattered as widely as the jars themselves. Excavations revealed that many jars were not empty. Stone lids, human remains, and burial goods were found nearby, hinting that the vessels may have served as part of complex mortuary rituals. Yet the jars themselves raised new questions. How were such massive containers carved, transported, and arranged without the tools or machinery of later eras? Their placement on hilltops and plains suggests careful planning, but the reasoning behind their distribution has never been fully understood. Some jars contain traces of resin and organic material, evidence that suggests liquids or foodstuffs may have once been placed inside. These remains, however, are too degraded to confirm whether the jars served a practical function or a symbolic one tied to ritual activity. The uncertainty has left archaeologists divided, with some arguing for ceremonial use and others suspecting a role in daily life. Archaeologists noticed that the jars often stand near ancient trade routes. This led to speculation that they might have been linked to travellers or merchants moving through the region. Some researchers have suggested the jars were used to store food or water for journeys, but tests on their interiors provided no clear evidence of long-term storage. Their weathered surfaces carry no inscriptions or markings that could reveal their makers, and so the debate continues, with every theory encountering gaps that resist closure. Adding to the difficulty is the danger of exploring the sites themselves. During the conflicts of the 20th century, the Plain of Jars became heavily bombed, and unexploded ordnance still litters the fields. Archaeologists and local communities have worked carefully to clear certain areas, but large portions of the landscape remain unsafe to this day. The jars endure in off-limits places, their stories sealed not only by time but by the scars of modern warfare. Even with so many obstacles, new research has begun to uncover fragments of their history. In recent years, scientists have dated soil and charcoal found near the jars to more than 2,000 years ago, suggesting they belong to an Iron Age culture about which little is known. Such findings reinforce the idea that the jars played an important role in rituals connected to death and remembrance. Still, the absence of written records leaves their exact purpose shrouded in silence. At newly cleared sites, recent excavations have revealed smaller jars beside the massive ones, suggesting that their sizes may have carried different meanings. Some researchers believe the variation could point to social hierarchies or stages of burial rites, though no consistent pattern has been confirmed. The mix of large and small vessels adds another layer to the puzzle rather than resolving it. For the people living nearby, The jars are not only relics, but also part of daily life. Fields and villages have grown up around them, and oral traditions continue to keep alive the belief that giants once roamed the land. Children play among the stone vessels, and farmers work the soil that has nourished generations beside these enigmatic monuments. The jars have become part of the cultural identity of the region, their mystery woven into both scholarship and folklore. They linger across the Laotian hillsides, their hollow mouths open as if still waiting to reveal a purpose no one alive has yet uncovered. Göbekli Tepe, on a barren hilltop in southeastern Turkey, a forest of stone pillars rises from the earth, each one carved and placed by human hands more than 11,000 years ago. The pillars are arranged in circles, some towering over 16 feet high, their surfaces covered in images of animals, abstract symbols, and human-like figures. From above, the site looks less like a village and more like a sanctuary, deliberately constructed to endure long after its builders were gone. The story of Göbekli Tepe began in the 1960s, when a survey team noted unusual stone fragments in the area, but assumed they were part of a medieval cemetery. It was not until 1994, when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt re-examined the hill, that the true nature of the site began to unfold. Excavations soon revealed a complex unlike anything seen before, predating the invention of pottery, writing, or the wheel. The discovery forced scholars to question long-held assumptions about the origins of human civilization. Each pillar at the site carries its own set of carvings. Lions, snakes, boars, birds, and scorpions crowd the stone surfaces, their outlines still sharp despite millennia of weathering. Some pillars are shaped into stylized human forms, with arms and hands folded across the front, suggesting that the structures may represent powerful beings or ancestors. The level of artistry on display challenges the idea that early hunter-gatherers lived only in temporary shelters and lacked the organization to create monumental works. What makes Göbekli Tepe even more extraordinary is its age. Radiocarbon dating places its construction as early as 9,600 BCE, thousands of years before Stonehenge or the Egyptian pyramids. At a time when most human groups were still moving seasonally in search of food, the builders of this site gathered in one place to carve, transport, and erect massive stones weighing many tons. The effort required not only skill but also coordination, suggesting social structures more complex than previously imagined for that era. The site itself consists of multiple enclosures, each containing two larger central pillars surrounded by smaller ones, arranged in a circle. Archaeologists believe these central pillars may have symbolized figures of great importance, perhaps deities or mythic ancestors, yet no traces of dwellings, hearths, or domestic life have been found, pointing to a place meant for ceremony rather than habitation. The absence of everyday artifacts makes the purpose of Göbekli Tepe even more elusive. One of the greatest puzzles is why it was eventually buried. Layers of backfill cover the enclosures, and evidence suggests the site was deliberately entombed after centuries of use. Whether this act was meant to protect the structures, close a chapter in ritual life, or mark a cultural shift is unknown. The intentional burial preserved the carvings remarkably well, allowing modern researchers to see details that would otherwise have eroded. Among these preserved details are rare depictions of headless human figures, imagery that has fueled speculation about ritual sacrifice or symbolic death. The construction techniques also remain unclear. The limestone used for the pillars was quarried nearby, but shaping and moving such massive stones without metal tools or wheels poses a serious challenge. Experiments with replicas show that it would have required large teams working in coordination, yet the exact methods are still a matter of debate. The sheer scale of the project suggests a workforce organized for a common purpose, hinting at rituals or beliefs powerful enough to unite scattered communities. Göbekli Tepe has reshaped how archaeologists view the relationship between religion and settlement. Rather than agriculture leading to the rise of temples, this site suggests the opposite, that shared ritual spaces may have drawn people together first, eventually giving rise to farming and permanent villages. If true, It means that spiritual or symbolic needs may have been the driving force behind one of humanity's greatest transformations. Only a fraction of the hill has been uncovered, despite decades of excavation. Ground surveys indicate that many more enclosures remain buried, holding secrets still hidden beneath the soil. Each season of research brings discoveries, from intricate carvings to the alignment of the structures with celestial patterns, yet the meaning of these findings remains open to interpretation. Beneath the soil of that Turkish hill, more circles of buried pillars still wait, guarding a story that refuses to be fully told. Nazca Lines. The desert of southern Peru holds a secret that cannot be grasped from the ground. Stretching across the arid plain are enormous shapes etched into the earth, some resembling animals, others forming vast geometric patterns. Known as the Nazca Lines, they appear almost invisible at eye level, yet from above, their forms emerge with startling clarity, covering miles of desert floor with designs that seem impossibly precise for their age. The lines first gained widespread attention in the late 1920s, when pilots flying over the Nazca Desert reported seeing strange markings spread across the barren landscape. What looked from the ground like simple paths or trenches revealed themselves from the air as elaborate figures. A hummingbird with delicate wings, a spider stretched across the sand, and a monkey with a spiraled tail. These images, carved centuries ago, were so immense that their creators could never have seen the full designs while standing on the ground. Between 200 BCE and 600 CE, the Nazca culture flourished, leaving behind the lines that archaeologists now study. The people removed the reddish surface stones of the desert, exposing the lighter soil beneath to form the striking contrast of each design. The arid climate and lack of wind preserved the markings, leaving them visible after nearly 2,000 years. Despite this knowledge of how they were made, the question of why they were created remains far less certain. Some researchers believe the lines may have been tied to water, a precious resource in the desert. Many of the geometric shapes align with underground aquifers or point toward distant mountains, suggesting the figures may have served as a kind of map or guide to hidden sources. Others note that water rituals were central to Nazca life, and that the giant figures may have been drawn as offerings to the gods in hopes of securing rainfall. Yet no single explanation fits all the designs, leaving their ultimate purpose unsettled. Astronomical connections have also been proposed. Certain straight lines appear to align with the solstice sunrises and sunsets, hinting that the desert may have functioned as a giant observatory. Maria Reiche, a German mathematician who dedicated her life to studying the Nazca lines in the mid-20th century, argued passionately for this interpretation. She spent decades measuring the lines, documenting their patterns, and protecting them from damage, but even she admitted that many questions could not be answered with certainty. The sheer diversity of the figures deepens the mystery. More than 300 different shapes have been documented, ranging from simple lines and trapezoids to animals, plants, and even human-like figures. Some stretch for hundreds of feet, their proportions so carefully executed that modern observers struggle to imagine how the Nazca people planned and executed them without a vantage point from above. Wooden stakes, found in the soil, suggest they may have used simple surveying techniques, but the scale and precision still inspire wonder. Beyond their construction, the cultural meaning of the geoglyphs continues to puzzle scholars. Were they pathways for ceremonial processions, traced by footsteps in rituals long forgotten? Did the massive animal figures embody deities, spirits, or mythological beings central to Nazca belief? Or were they symbols of a worldview that connected the desert, the sky, and the cycles of life in ways we can only guess at today? Each interpretation carries weight, but none settles the debate. What adds to the enigma is how well the lines have endured. Centuries of exposure should have erased them, yet the stable desert climate preserved the drawings as though they were intended for future generations to see. This preservation raises an eerie question. Were these figures meant to be viewed by people of their own time, or by those who would come long after? Standing today at one of the desert's observation towers, a visitor can glimpse the curves of the hand figure or the spirals of the monkey, but only from the sky do the full images reveal themselves. Even with modern technology capturing every angle, the purpose behind the Nazca lines remains just beyond reach, like a message written on the earth whose meaning has slipped away with time. In the silence of the desert, the carved figures endure, gazing across the land with secrets that remain unsolved. Saqqara bird. Resting in a quiet glass case of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo is a small wooden figure that carries a mystery larger than its modest size suggests. Shaped like a bird, yet fitted with wings more reminiscent of an aircraft, this artifact has become one of the most puzzling relics of ancient Egypt. Its discovery did not involve a sprawling ruin or towering monument, but instead an unassuming piece of sycamore wood that continues to ignite debates about its meaning and purpose. The object came to light in 1898 during excavations at Saqqara, one of Egypt's oldest and most important burial grounds. Amid the countless finds unearthed from the necropolis, this particular figure, later known as the Saqqara bird, was catalogued and stored away with little fanfare. Only decades later did Dr. Khalil Masaiha, an Egyptian physician with a passion for aviation, bring the artifact into the spotlight by suggesting it might represent early knowledge of flight. For decades, it attracted little attention, overshadowed by the grandeur of pyramids and richly decorated tombs nearby. Only when researchers began to study its shape more closely did the questions surrounding it begin to surface. The figure itself is striking in its simplicity. It measures about 7 inches long, carved from a single piece of wood, and shows the streamlined body of a bird with carefully shaped wings. What stands out most is its lack of feet and the presence of a vertical tail, features that do not resemble any natural bird but seem designed for balance and lift. The more the details are examined, the more the artifact seems to blur the line between a symbolic figure and a model of flight. Early interpretations leaned toward the symbolic. Many scholars suggested the figure was a representation of the god Horus, often depicted as a falcon, or perhaps a simple child's toy placed in a tomb as a companion for the afterlife. These ideas fit within the broader context of Egyptian burial practices, where symbolic items were commonly included. Yet the unusual design of the wings and tail resisted easy categorization, leaving room for far more provocative theories. In the mid-20th century, the artifact drew new attention when some researchers proposed it could represent an ancient attempt at understanding flight. The wings, with their curved edges, and the vertical tail, more like that of an aircraft than a bird, sparked speculation that the object was more than just symbolic art. Tests with replicas showed that under certain conditions, it could glide short distances, suggesting it may have been intentionally shaped with aerodynamics in mind. Some of these replicas, scaled up and tested with minor adjustments, demonstrated stable gliding capabilities that fueled speculation about whether ancient Egyptians experimented with similar designs. While these experiments intrigued the public, they also divided scholars. Critics argued that similarities to modern aircraft were coincidental, and that the artifact should be seen strictly within the cultural framework of ancient Egypt. They pointed out that wood warps over centuries, meaning the figure's current form may differ from its original shape. Supporters of the flight theory countered that even with such factors, the deliberate symmetry of the wings and tail could not be ignored. Adding to the puzzle is the context of its discovery. Unlike other objects tied to ritual or daily life, the Saqqara bird was found without inscriptions or clear associations to guide interpretation. It did not come with texts explaining its use, nor was it buried alongside similar objects that might suggest a category or function. Its isolation leaves a gap in understanding, as though the artifact was meant to carry meaning we are no longer able to decode. The absence of comparable artifacts in nearby tombs only deepens the mystery, raising the question of whether this piece was a unique creation rather than part of a broader tradition. Modern studies continue to revisit the figure. Engineers and archaeologists alike have tested replicas in wind tunnels, debated its balance and design, and considered whether it might have served as a ceremonial object connected to the skies. Despite these efforts, no consensus has emerged. Each theory, religious symbol, toy, ritual object, or experimental glider remains plausible, yet none fully captures the enigma of the piece. The Saqqara bird endures as a reminder that not every discovery fits neatly into established categories. It stands apart from the monumental achievements that dominate Egypt's history, offering instead a quiet mystery that invites endless curiosity. One glance at its slender wings and carved form suggests a purpose we have yet to understand, as though the wooden figure carries a secret of the past still waiting to take flight. Sanxingdui treasures. The first sign of something unusual came not from a grand excavation, but from the hands of a farmer in Sichuan province in 1929. While digging clay for repairs near the village of Sanxingdui, he struck fragments of jade and stone that seemed older than anything known in the region. The pieces were curious, yet they did not immediately spark widespread attention, and much of the mystery they hinted at would remain hidden for decades. It was not until 1986 that the ground gave up its greatest secret. Archaeologists uncovered two immense pits filled with broken artifacts, life-sized bronze masks with exaggerated eyes, towering ritual trees, delicate gold ornaments, and ivory tusks stacked in deliberate arrangements. The scale of the discovery stunned even seasoned researchers. This was not a random collection of objects, but a carefully buried trove unlike anything associated with other Chinese cultures of the time. Among the most haunting finds were the massive bronze heads with their wide staring eyes and elongated ears. The stylized features seemed almost otherworldly, leading some early observers to wonder whether they represented spirits, ancestors, or beings from distant realms. The craftsmanship was astonishing, with details so precise that they suggested advanced metalworking traditions not known elsewhere in Bronze Age China. Attention soon turned to the question of who created these objects. Historical records of the ancient Shu kingdom mention a powerful culture in Sichuan, but little detail survives. The Sanxingdui artifacts appeared to confirm that this forgotten civilization had been far more complex and artistically daring than once imagined. Yet the absence of written texts left their beliefs and practices shrouded in silence, forcing archaeologists to interpret meaning from the objects themselves. One particularly striking artifact was a bronze tree rising over 4 meters high, with branches sprouting delicate leaves, flowers, and birds. Its symbolic richness invited countless interpretations, from mythological references to cosmic diagrams. The scale alone suggested that rituals performed here involved both spectacle and deep spiritual meaning. To those who studied it, the tree felt like a frozen fragment of a mythology we no longer understand. The discovery also raised questions about connections between Sanxingdui and other early civilizations. The artistic styles, with their bold geometric patterns and exaggerated human forms, bore little resemblance to the artifacts of the Shang dynasty flourishing to the north at the same time. This difference suggested that the people of Sanxingdui developed independently, following their own path of religious expression and technical innovation. The pits revealed more than treasures. Archaeologists also found signs of deliberate destruction. Many artifacts had been smashed or burned before burial, as though they were offerings made in a single dramatic ritual. Why such a vast collection of wealth was intentionally destroyed remains one of the deepest mysteries. Was it part of a ceremony to mark the end of an era, a desperate act in response to catastrophe, or a symbolic return of riches to the earth? Excavations in recent years have expanded the picture further. New pits uncovered in 2021 revealed additional objects, including ornate bronze altars, masks inlaid with jade, and intricately woven silk fragments. Each new find reinforced the impression of a culture that poured immense resources into ritual practice, leaving behind objects meant to communicate with forces beyond the human world. The scale of Sanxingdui's treasures also implied an organized and prosperous society. Creating such monumental bronzes required not only skilled artisans, but also systems for mining, smelting, and transporting materials on a large scale. This was a civilization capable of feats of coordination equal to any of its contemporaries, yet for reasons still unclear, it vanished, leaving only these scattered remnants behind. For all the artifacts revealed, countless questions remain unanswered. Why did this culture bury its masterpieces, never to be retrieved? What beliefs guided the creation of such unusual forms? And how much more lies hidden beneath the fields of Sichuan, waiting for discovery? The treasures of Sanxingdui remain silent, but their presence suggests a civilization that understood the world in ways we can scarcely imagine. It is a mystery that lingers in the staring eyes of the bronze masks, as if they still watch across the centuries, holding secrets that no excavation has yet been able to unearth. Phaistos Disc. Sunlight once filtered across the ruins of the Minoan palace at Phaistos, falling on broken stones that had weathered centuries of silence. Beneath these layers of history, archaeologists sought pottery shards and tools, the ordinary traces of life. What they did not expect was a clay disc, pressed with strange symbols unlike anything ever found before in Crete. Its presence seemed to whisper of a forgotten system of communication, one that defied the categories of known scripts. The disc came to light in 1908 when Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier unearthed it from the palace's northern complex. Measuring about 15 centimeters across, it was made of fired clay and decorated on both sides with spiraling rows of stamped images. More than 200 symbols covered the surface, arranged in a careful order that spiraled inward, each impression made with a tool rather than carved by hand. This detail alone suggested an innovation centuries ahead of its time, the use of movable stamps to create repeating characters. A closer study revealed that the disc bore 45 distinct signs. Some depicted recognizable shapes, such as birds, fish, or human figures, while others showed abstract patterns that invited endless speculation. Unlike Linear A or Linear B, the other known scripts of Minoan Crete, these symbols had no obvious connection to any later language. To scholars, it appeared as though the disc represented an isolated experiment in writing, one that left no descendants. From the moment of discovery, debates about the disc's meaning multiplied. Some suggested it recorded a hymn or prayer, given the ceremonial setting in which it was found. Others believed it might be a calendar, a game board, or even a coded message meant only for initiates of a lost cult. The spiral layout encouraged imaginative interpretations, as if the symbols were meant to be read as a journey toward a central point of understanding. Yet, no single explanation ever gained universal acceptance. The method of its creation raised questions just as perplexing as its content. The use of pre-made stamps implied a level of planning and uniformity not seen in other scripts of the Bronze Age Aegean. This hinted at the possibility of a printing system that appeared centuries before the invention of movable type in Europe. If so, it suggested that the makers of the disc were experimenting with ways to reproduce text on a scale far larger than a single artifact. Comparisons with other ancient cultures offered little clarity. Efforts to link the symbols to hieroglyphs from Egypt or signs from Anatolia produced intriguing resemblances but no firm connections. The disc seemed to stand alone, resisting attempts to place it within the known networks of Mediterranean communication. It was as if the object had appeared out of nowhere, carrying a message from a people who left no other written trace. Theories about its purpose sometimes lean toward the dramatic. A few researchers speculated that it might encode a sacred chant intended to be recited during rituals within the palace. Others imagined it as a tool for divination, with priests tracing the spiral and interpreting its sequence of signs. Each proposal revealed more about the creativity of the scholars than about the disc itself, which refused to yield its secret. Even the circumstances of its burial added to the enigma. The disc was discovered alongside tablets inscribed with Linear A, but none of those texts offered a hint at the meaning of its unique symbols. Why was this singular object stored in the palace at Phaistos? Was it a treasured artifact passed down through generations, or simply an experiment that never caught on? Its isolation within the archaeological record leaves such questions unanswerable. Contemporary technology has deepened the mystery rather than solved it. Digital imaging has allowed for precise analysis of each symbol, confirming the use of stamps and highlighting minute details. Yet no pattern has been uncovered that can definitively connect the signs to spoken language. The disc remains undeciphered, a closed text whose voice has been silenced by time. For more than a century, the Phaistos Disc has resisted every attempt to translate its message. Its spiral of stamped images still draws the eye inward, pulling viewers toward a center where meaning should be, but never reveals itself. Teotihuacan. From the air, the valley northeast of modern Mexico City reveals a grid of ancient avenues lined with the shadows of pyramids that still dominate the horizon. Rising above them is the Pyramid of the Sun, a towering structure that dwarfs most temples of the ancient world. This city, known as Teotihuacan, has long drawn wonder for its scale, its mystery, and the silence of the people who built it. When Spanish chroniclers first heard of the site in the 16th century, they were told by the Aztecs that the city had already been abandoned for centuries. The Aztecs gave it the name Teotihuacan, the place where the gods were made, seeing it as the birthplace of divine power. To them, it was already a ruin shrouded in reverence, with none remembering the true name of the city or the people who constructed it. Archaeological investigations have shown that Teotihuacan was once home to more than 100 inhabitants, making it one of the largest cities in the world during its peak around the first half of the first millennium CE. Its avenues stretched for miles, aligned with astronomical precision, while apartment compounds housed thousands of families. The order and scale suggest a society of extraordinary organization, yet almost no records survive to reveal who its rulers were or how they governed such a vast population. The Avenue of the Dead, the city's central road, runs straight toward the Pyramid of the Moon, flanked by temples and ceremonial platforms. At its heart lies the Pyramid of the Sun, which stands more than 65 meters tall. Beneath this immense structure, archaeologists have found a tunnel leading to chambers filled with symbolic offerings, jaguar bones, jade, seashells, and even liquid mercury sealed in underground pools. Such discoveries hint at a rich spiritual life, though the precise rituals carried out remain a matter of speculation. Traces of incense burners and offerings, arranged in careful patterns, suggest that fire and smoke may have played a central role in connecting the living with the divine. The artistry of Teotihuacan is preserved in murals that still cling to the walls of ruined compounds. These paintings depict colourful gods, mythic creatures, and elaborate processions, suggesting a culture deeply invested in ceremony and myth. Unlike the later Maya, however, the builders of Teotihuacan left behind almost no decipherable writing. Archaeologists have noted symbols recurring in multiple compounds, but whether these represent names, titles, or entire narratives is still unknown. Their voices, preserved only in symbols and images, remain just out of reach. The city's economic and cultural power extended far beyond the valley. Artifacts from Teotihuacan have been found hundreds of miles away in Maya cities such as Tikal, where murals depict Teotihuacano warriors in feathered headdresses. Whether through conquest, trade, or diplomacy, Teotihuacan's influence reached across Mesoamerica, shaping societies far removed from its central streets. Obsidian from Teotihuacan's nearby quarries has been traced to distant regions, showing that its material wealth fueled networks that stretched across vast landscapes. Yet, the exact nature of this influence remains debated, as little evidence survives to prove whether it was empire, alliance, or something more complex. Grand though it was, Teotihuacan suddenly collapsed in the 6th century CE, leaving its downfall unexplained. Archaeological evidence shows signs of deliberate burning in parts of the city, including elite residences and temples. This destruction suggests internal conflict, perhaps a revolt against the ruling class. Yet other possibilities remain. Resource shortages, drought, or invasions may have played a role. The truth of what shattered this great city has never been agreed upon. What deepens the puzzle is that, unlike other ancient centres, Teotihuacan has yielded almost no depictions of its rulers, no grand statues, no named kings carved into stone, no inscriptions that preserve dynasties. It is as if the society erased its leaders from the record, or perhaps never celebrated individuals in the same way neighboring civilizations did. This absence fuels questions about how power was structured in a city of such scale. In recent decades, new excavations have added yet more layers to the enigma. In 2003, archaeologists discovered a sealed tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Within its chambers lay thousands of artifacts, jade figurines, seashells carried from distant coasts, and mysterious spheres coated with pyrite that once gleamed like gold. Some researchers believe these objects represent an underworld model, but their exact function remains uncertain. Clues to Teotihuacan's fate may rest underground, sealed beneath layers of stone and time. Shigir Idol. Deep in the peat bogs of the Ural Mountains in Russia, the landscape stretches in muted shades of green and brown, dotted with pools of water that seem to swallow the light. It was in one of these bogs, in 1890, that workers cutting peat stumbled upon an upright wooden figure, unlike anything they had seen. At first, it seemed no more than a carved plank, darkened by centuries of moisture, but closer inspection revealed intricate patterns etched along its length. The figure, now known as the Shigir Idol, stretches more than 5 meters tall, making it the oldest known wooden sculpture in the world. Radiocarbon dating has placed parts of the idol at nearly 12,000 years old, meaning it predates the invention of metal tools in the region. Its survival is remarkable. Peat preserves wood exceptionally well, but even in such conditions, few artifacts of this age have endured. Carved into the idol are a series of geometric patterns, zigzags, and faces that seem to peer out from the surface. Some researchers have interpreted these as symbolic or ritualistic, while others suggest they may tell stories or mark events. The faces, with hollow eyes and elongated features, give the sculpture an almost otherworldly presence, as though the figure watches anyone who approaches the bog. Recent analysis suggests that some of the faces may correspond to celestial symbols or phases of the moon, hinting that the idol could have served as a calendar or a marker of seasonal cycles. This interpretation, though speculative, adds another layer to the puzzle, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of time and nature by its creators. The context of its creation remains as mysterious as the idol itself. It was discovered far from any known settlements of the time, suggesting it may have held a spiritual or ceremonial significance for hunter-gatherer societies. The precision and detail of the carvings indicate a level of artistic skill and symbolic thought previously unrecognized in such early cultures. Pollen analysis around the find site suggests that the surrounding landscape was deliberately cleared, perhaps to create a ceremonial space where the idol would stand prominently. Pieces of the idol are joined together with wooden pegs, showing that it was constructed in sections. This method hints at planning and design, as the sculptors had to conceive of the work in its entirety before assembly. Some scholars believe it may have represented a deity or served as a protective figure for the surrounding lands, though the true purpose is lost to time. Later studies revealed that the wood itself comes from larch trees, a species abundant in the region, but chosen perhaps for its durability. Analysis of the tool marks suggests the use of flint implements, and the careful spacing of carvings points to a deliberate rhythm, almost like a narrative unfolding along the length of the idol. Every line and symbol seems intentional, yet their meaning remains an unsolved puzzle. Microscopic studies of the surface reveal traces of pigments, indicating that the carvings may have been originally painted. If true, the idol would have been even more striking in its original form, with colours emphasising symbols and faces now lost to centuries of decay. The idol was originally buried in several segments, which were later joined by conservators. This discovery raises questions about how it was originally erected and whether the division into sections held symbolic significance. Some hypothesize that the height of the figure was meant to amplify its presence in the landscape, making it visible across the flat expanses of the bog. Some researchers propose that the segmented burial may have allowed the idol to be reassembled during special rituals, making each unveiling an event of communal or spiritual importance. With the aid of modern imaging, the idol continues to reveal new insights to researchers. Three-dimensional scans have revealed subtle details invisible to the naked eye, including hidden grooves and tiny marks that may represent counting systems or ritual notations. Even with such technology, the full interpretation of the Shigir Idol remains beyond reach, its carvings defying complete understanding. The idol's longevity challenges assumptions about the capabilities and beliefs of Mesolithic peoples. It demonstrates that symbolic thought and monumental artistry existed far earlier than previously believed, reshaping the timeline of human cultural development. Yet, the people who made it left behind no written records, leaving us to reconstruct meaning from form alone. Its carved faces still watch silently, guarding secrets no one has yet deciphered. Screaming mummies of Egypt. Under the blazing cliffs of Egypt, tombs stand quiet, their shadowed passageways hiding secrets that have endured for centuries. In one chamber, the air is still and heavy, disturbed only by the occasional sound of sand shifting under the archaeologists' feet. Among the treasures of the pharaohs, some of the dead lie in a way that instantly arrests attention. Mouths frozen in a silent scream, faces twisted as if captured at the exact moment of terror. These are the so-called screaming mummies, whose contorted expressions have puzzled scientists and historians alike for decades. The first of these remarkable burials came to notice during early 20th century excavations near the Valley of the Kings. Archaeologists cataloguing tombs found bodies with unusual postures, their mouths wide open and limbs bent at unnatural angles. One notable discovery in the tomb of Amenhotep III revealed a mummy whose face seemed to scream even in death, its features preserved by careful mummification, yet hauntingly distorted. Researchers like Dr. Zahi Hawass have documented similar cases, emphasizing how these expressions sharply contrast with the serene and composed faces typical of royal mummies. The physical characteristics of the screaming mummies are striking. Their mouths are agape, eyes bulging slightly, and hands often positioned as though clutching at air. Some show signs of severe spinal curvature, suggesting the bodies were contorted before burial. The preservation techniques of the time allowed soft tissues and facial muscles to remain partially intact, capturing expressions in ways rarely seen elsewhere. The sheer realism of their agony creates a visual impact that has both fascinated and unsettled those who study them. Historically, these mummies belong to periods when elaborate burial rituals were at their height. Tombs from the New Kingdom, especially around the 14th to 12th centuries BCE, often contained grave goods, ritual objects, and inscriptions invoking protection for the afterlife. Funerary practices aimed to guide the deceased safely to the next world, yet the screaming mummies seem to contradict the intended serenity of these rites. They raise questions about whether these were anomalies, deliberate artistic choices, or results of accidents during the embalming process. Scientific investigations have brought new insight, but no definitive answers. CT scans and X-rays reveal fractures, dislocations, and chemical imbalances that might have contributed to the contorted postures. In some cases, researchers found evidence of post-mortem changes in the body's ligaments and joints, but not enough to fully explain the extreme facial expressions. Radiocarbon dating confirms their age, and tissue analysis shows standard mummification materials like natron and resins, yet the screams captured in wood and linen remain unexplained. Recent chemical analyses of the embalming materials have revealed traces of rare resins and aromatic compounds that were not commonly used in typical mummification at the time. These substances may have been intended to preserve the body in a specific form or to achieve ritualistic effects, yet their exact purpose is unknown. The presence of such exotic compounds raises questions about whether the screaming mummies represent an experimental or elite burial practice, suggesting that the ancients may have sought to capture not just the body, but the very essence of fear or power in death. Several theories attempt to make sense of these haunting forms. Some suggest that sudden death, violent illness, or trauma could have frozen the faces in shock. Others argue that ritualistic elements were at play, with the expressions meant to protect the tomb, ward off evil, or signal suffering in the afterlife. Yet no inscriptions explicitly reference such practices, leaving each interpretation speculative. The mystery persists because the evidence offers multiple possibilities but no certainty. Comparisons with other Egyptian burials only deepen the puzzle. While most mummies are arranged in calm repose, a few show minor contortions due to burial mishandling or natural decomposition. The screaming mummies, however, surpass these exceptions in both intensity and consistency, suggesting something unique occurred. Their preservation is so meticulous that even modern observers struggle to determine whether the expressions reflect life, death, or an intentional mummification ritual. Public fascination with these mummies has grown over the years. Exhibitions of their remains, alongside more conventional burials, have drawn crowds eager to witness the strange mixture of artistry and horror. Scholars debate their significance in journals and conferences, often emphasizing the limits of interpretation. The visual impact of a silent scream preserved across millennia continues to challenge our understanding of both Egyptian culture and the mysteries of death itself. Their silent cries still echo through the tombs, leaving more questions than answers. Moai of Easter Island. The wind sweeps across the barren volcanic plains of Easter Island, carrying with it the faint scent of the ocean and the whispers of a vanished civilization. Towering stone figures emerge from the horizon, their elongated faces casting long shadows over the red earth. These Moai, carved from volcanic tuff, are a silent testament to human skill and determination, yet their purpose and the story of their creators remain enigmatic. Early European explorers arriving in the 18th century were astonished by the sight of hundreds of these statues, standing in solemn rows, some toppled, others still upright. The islanders, descendants of the Rapa Nui people, spoke of their ancestors' feats in reverent tones, yet even they could offer only fragmented accounts of the ceremonies and meanings associated with the Moai. The initial awe of outsiders quickly turned to puzzlement. How had a small, isolated society managed to carve, transport, and erect such massive stones with no draft animals or advanced machinery? The largest Moai, archaeologists estimate, rise to more than 10 meters in height and carry weights of up to 82 tons. Carved from the slopes of Rano Raraku, a volcanic crater, the statues were then moved across the island to ceremonial platforms called ahu. Experiments with wooden sledges, ropes, and coordinated human effort have demonstrated that the task was possible, yet the scale of coordination required hints at a highly organized society with profound communal and ritual motivation. Using ground-penetrating radar, researchers have found that many Moai are not just heads, but figures buried deep, with only their tops visible. Excavations suggest that some statues extend deep into the soil, their hidden bases meticulously shaped to provide stability. This discovery raises questions about whether the visible monuments were intentionally designed to appear taller or more imposing, and what role the buried sections played in the islanders' ceremonial practices. Each Moai displays subtle individual features: elongated ears, pronounced brows, and lips pressed in solemn expressions, suggesting that they may have represented specific ancestors or chiefs. Their backs are often adorned with shallow carvings, while the platforms they rest upon sometimes contain offerings and burial sites. Despite these clues, no inscriptions or written records clarify exactly why the statues were commissioned or how their presence influenced daily life on the island. Some Moai were toppled centuries ago, long before European contact, leaving researchers to debate the causes. Internal conflict, resource depletion, or shifts in social power may have contributed to the dramatic upheaval. The fallen figures, with their faces pressed into the earth, evoke a sense of violence and mystery, a civilization wrestling with its own achievements and limitations. Red scoria, a different volcanic stone, was used to carve the distinctive top knots known as pukao. These heavy stone hats were balanced atop the statues' heads, an architectural choice that remains puzzling given the complexity of lifting such a weight. Some scholars suggest the pukao symbolized status, spiritual energy, or divine protection, yet no definitive evidence confirms their exact meaning. The movement of the pukao, archaeological evidence shows, likely involved temporary scaffolding and carefully designed ramps, signs of ingenuity once overlooked on the island. Tool marks on the stones suggest a sophisticated knowledge of leverage, balance, and friction. These findings point to a society that combined technical skill with ritual significance, hinting that the act of moving and erecting the moai may have been as important spiritually as the final placement. Over the decades, conservation efforts have revealed traces of pigments, suggesting that moai may have originally been painted in vivid colours. Red, white, and black pigments, now faded, hint at ceremonies filled with visual symbolism, where the statue's presence was meant to inspire awe and reinforce social cohesion. These findings complicate the assumption of austere stone figures, revealing instead a dynamic, ceremonial landscape, once alive with colour and significance. Even today, the moai continue to raise questions. Recent studies suggest the statues may have been walked upright using rocking techniques, yet the precise methods remain debated. The interplay between engineering, ritual, and social organization suggests a society whose sophistication far exceeds the apparent simplicity of the island's resources. The moai of Easter Island endure as silent sentinels, monuments to human ambition and ingenuity, guarding secrets that time has carefully preserved, waiting for the curious to decipher their ancient message. Cochno Stone, a massive sandstone slab, rests beneath soil and grass on a quiet hillside in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland. Locals walking across the moor might never guess that below their feet lies one of the most remarkable carved stones in Europe, covered in a dense web of symbols whose meaning has never been fully unlocked. This hidden monument, known as the Cochno Stone, has fascinated and puzzled generations ever since it was first brought to light. The carvings stretch across an expanse of rock, measuring nearly 13 meters by 8 meters, making it among the largest known panels of prehistoric rock art in Britain. Spirals, rings, grooves, and hollow depressions ripple across its surface, in a pattern that seems both deliberate and enigmatic. What once guided the hand of its carvers remains a matter of speculation. When the stone was uncovered in 1887 by the local antiquarian Reverend James Harvey, its scale and intricacy took even seasoned researchers by surprise. Unlike scattered carvings found on other rocks across Scotland, the Cochno Stone seemed overwhelming in its detail, as if it had been intended to impress or record something of profound significance. The designs belong to what archaeologists call cup and ring marks, a form of prehistoric art found across Britain, Ireland, and parts of Europe. Yet nowhere else in Scotland has such a concentration been found on a single surface. This raises questions not only about the purpose of the carvings, but also about why such effort was focused on this one slab of stone lying exposed to the sky on a Scottish hillside. Early interpretations leaned toward religious symbolism, with the spirals and circles thought to represent the sun, stars, or even maps of the heavens. Others suggested they marked sacred ground, guiding rituals that are now lost to time. More recent theories have proposed that the patterns might be territorial markers, records of community identity, or even abstract art created without a single, fixed meaning. Each possibility highlights how much remains unknown. The stone's fate took an unusual turn in the 20th century. By the 1960s, fears grew that the carvings were being damaged by visitors who scratched graffiti into the ancient grooves or chipped away at the rock. To protect it, authorities made the extraordinary decision in 1965 to bury the Cochno Stone beneath several feet of soil. This act preserved the carvings from further harm, but also sealed them away from public view, leaving one of Scotland's great mysteries hidden once again. For decades, the stone was spoken of, but not seen, its presence remembered only through old photographs and drawings. Interest revived in the early 21st century, as new archaeological techniques offered the chance to study it without risking damage. In 2015, researchers from the University of Glasgow led an excavation that briefly uncovered the Cochno Stone after half a century underground. Using 3D scanning and digital recording, they captured every groove and line in extraordinary detail before the slab was once again covered. The digital models revealed intricacies that earlier sketches could never show. Tiny details of tool marks became visible, offering clues to how the carvings were made and in what sequence. This suggests that the Cochno Stone was not the product of a single event, but part of a living tradition that connected communities over time. What continues to trouble researchers is the absence of definitive context. No burial sites, settlement remains, or artifacts have been found directly linked to the Cochno Stone, leaving its purpose adrift in speculation. Even its sheer size is unusual, suggesting that the people who carved it chose a stone of monumental scale deliberately, yet left no other trace of their lives nearby. It has been suggested that carving was less about the final form and more about the act itself. Others believe that the stone may have been part of a wider landscape of meaning, now obscured by time, where hills, rivers, and skies all played roles in a symbolic system that modern minds can only glimpse. Even in its hidden state, the Cochno Stone has become a meeting point between past and present. The digital scans are now available worldwide, allowing anyone to explore its carvings virtually. Those who advocate for its permanent re-exposure face the dilemma of preservation. Would public access ensure appreciation, or would it once again threaten the survival of the carvings? As it rests unseen beneath the moor, the Cochno Stone continues to guard its ancient patterns, leaving behind more questions than answers. Baghdad Battery. In the 1930s, during excavations near Baghdad, archaeologists uncovered a clay jar that did not seem to fit comfortably within the world it came from. The vessel was unremarkable at first glance, about the size of a hand, but inside were pieces of copper and iron, arranged in a way that suggested a purpose far more complex than simple storage. This curious object would later be called the Baghdad Battery, a name that hinted at the controversy it would ignite. The jar itself is thought to date back roughly 2,000 years, possibly to the Parthian or Sassanid periods. Its body is made of baked clay, standing just under 6 inches tall. Inside it, archaeologists found a rolled copper cylinder sealed with asphalt, with an iron rod running through the center. When viewed together, the components bear an uncanny resemblance to the design of a primitive galvanic cell, the type of object one might expect to see in a modern science laboratory rather than in an ancient settlement. What has fueled debate for decades is the possibility that the Baghdad Battery could generate electricity if filled with an acidic liquid, such as vinegar or lemon juice. Modern experiments using replicas of the jar have shown that this is indeed possible, producing small but measurable voltages. The notion that people in antiquity may have harnessed electrical power raises questions that challenge conventional timelines of technological development. Some researchers have suggested that the device might have been used for electroplating, a process where a thin layer of metal is deposited onto another surface. This theory grew from the fact that gilded objects have been found in the region, and a tool capable of providing current could explain how such fine coatings were achieved. Yet no direct evidence links the jar to such activity, leaving the idea tantalizing but unproven. Others have proposed that the object may have served a ritual purpose rather than a practical one. The materials themselves, clay, copper, iron, asphalt, were accessible and familiar to the people of the time, and arranging them in such a manner may have held symbolic meaning. Perhaps the jar was part of a larger religious or cultural practice that is no longer understood. This interpretation does not rule out the possibility of electrical function, but places it in a very different context than modern technology. The debate widened as more examples of similar jars were reported, though none with the same level of detail as the original find. Replicas, built by scientists and engineers in the late 20th century, fueled fascination, showing how easily the design could be adapted to produce small sparks or currents. Demonstrations captured public imagination, encouraging the idea that ancient people may have been experimenting with forces often thought to belong solely to modern science. At the same time, skeptics argue that calling the object a battery imposes a modern framework onto the past. They point out that no wires, conductors, or clear applications for electrical current have been discovered alongside the jars. To them, the idea of ancient electricity remains speculative, with the jar possibly serving as nothing more than a storage vessel or container for scrolls. The truth remains difficult to pin down, as the original context of the discovery was not recorded in detail, leaving gaps in evidence. Museums have also played a role in shaping the mystery. The Baghdad Battery was once displayed in the National Museum of Iraq, becoming one of its most famous artifacts. However, turmoil in the region, including the looting of the museum in 2003, has clouded the artifact's status, with reports of damage or disappearance adding another layer of uncertainty. What should have been a key piece of evidence is now partly obscured by history itself. The enduring fascination of the Baghdad Battery lies in its ambiguity. If it truly functioned as a source of power, it would suggest a level of experimentation with natural forces that rewrites part of human history. If it was symbolic or purely practical in a non-electrical sense, it still represents a striking example of ancient ingenuity. Either way, it stands as a reminder of how incomplete our understanding of the past can be, even when the evidence rests in plain view. As long as the questions remain unanswered, the small clay jar continues to cast a long shadow, challenging us to consider what knowledge may have flickered and vanished long before the modern age. Tartaria tablets. Near the Transylvanian village of Tartaria, a 1961 discovery of small clay objects shook long-standing ideas about humanity's past. The discovery did not come in a grand temple or sprawling city, but in a modest Neolithic site, where ritual pits and simple burials spoke of a farming community from deep antiquity. What emerged from the soil were 3 tablets. No larger than a hand, their surfaces pressed with markings that seemed to carry meaning far beyond their humble setting. The tablets are made of unfired clay, baked only after their discovery to preserve them. 2 are rectangular and 1 is round, each inscribed with strange symbols arranged in rows and clusters. Some resemble animals, others geometric shapes, and still others are harder to classify. To the archaeologists present, led by Nikolai Vlasa, the signs bore a striking resemblance to writing, and that suggestion alone made the find extraordinary. What caused such excitement was the possibility that the Tartaria tablets might represent the earliest known form of writing in the world, predating Mesopotamian cuneiform by more than a millennium. Radiocarbon dating of the surrounding material placed them around 5,300 BCE, linking them to the Vinča culture, a Neolithic society that spread across the Balkans. If true, these unassuming objects could mean that the roots of written communication reached far deeper into European prehistory than previously believed. Not everyone agreed with this interpretation. Some scholars argued that the marks on the tablets were not writing at all, but symbolic motifs used in ritual or decoration. Similar patterns have been found on Vinča pottery and figurines, suggesting a shared visual language rather than a fully developed script. To others, however, the consistent arrangement of signs and their apparent repetition hinted at something more structured, as if rules of syntax or order were being tested. The circumstances of their discovery added yet another layer of intrigue. The tablets were found alongside the remains of a woman buried with ritual objects, including figurines and shells. This association has led some researchers to propose that the tablets had a ceremonial or religious function, perhaps linked to communication with the divine. The idea that they were sacred texts, rather than practical records, continues to influence debate about their meaning. Comparisons with symbols from Mesopotamia and Egypt have only deepened the mystery. Certain motifs appear strikingly similar to later forms of writing, sparking theories of cultural connection or independent invention. Yet, no evidence of direct contact has been found, leaving scholars to wonder whether the Vinča culture was experimenting with its own early form of notation that never fully developed into a broader written tradition. Controversy also surrounds the dating of the tablets. Because the clay itself could not be directly tested, the chronology relies on associated material, including bones found nearby. Some critics argue that this method leaves room for doubt and that the tablets might be younger than suggested. Even so, the earliest possible date places them at a time when no other known writing system existed, making them a puzzle with profound implications. For decades, the Tartaria tablets were kept largely in obscurity, studied by a small circle of specialists and occasionally displayed in Romanian collections. Yet their reputation has grown steadily, especially as discoveries of Vinca symbols across the Balkans have shown that these marks were not isolated. Instead, they appear to be part of a wider tradition that spanned centuries, suggesting that symbolic communication was deeply embedded in daily life. For all their presence, the tablets remain mute, and it is this silence that makes them so enigmatic. They hold signs that seem on the verge of speech, but never cross the threshold into words that can be read. Unlike Mesopotamian cuneiform, no long inscriptions exist to provide context or unlock the meaning of the symbols. Every interpretation remains tentative, balancing between the possibility of true writing and the allure of ritual symbolism. The Tartaria tablets challenge the idea that writing emerged only once in the great river valleys of the ancient Near East. Whether they represent a forgotten experiment in notation or a sacred code meant only for ritual eyes, they remind us that the human desire to record, to symbolize, and to give permanence to thought may have deeper roots than we imagine. And so, the small clay fragments remain fragile survivors from a vanished culture, carrying marks that hint at a story we may never fully learn. Sacsayhuamán walls. High on the outskirts of Cusco, where thin mountain air carries the sound of wind across grassy plateaus, rises a fortress of stone so immense that it seems to challenge reason itself. The walls of Sacsayhuamán dominate the landscape, their towering blocks stacked with such precision that even a sheet of paper cannot fit between them. Visitors standing at the base of these massive structures often find themselves overwhelmed not just by the scale of the stones, but by the unsettling question of how they were ever placed here. Unlike many ruins where erosion has softened edges and blurred shapes, the walls at Sacsayhuamán remain sharp, angular, and deliberate. Some blocks are small enough to be carried by groups of workers, but others weigh hundreds of tons, standing taller than a person. The largest are estimated at over 20 feet in height, yet all are fitted together in intricate patterns that zigzag across the plateau. No mortar holds them in place, and yet the walls have withstood centuries of earthquakes that toppled more recent buildings in Cusco below. Accounts from the Spanish chroniclers in the 16th century offer a glimpse of how extraordinary these structures appeared even then. When conquistadors first entered Cusco and encountered Sacsayhuamán, they struggled to believe that human hands had shaped the site. Their records describe astonishment at stones so vast that oxen teams could not move them, let alone lift them into walls that towered over the surrounding land. To the chroniclers, the fortress seemed less the work of labourers and more of giants or supernatural beings. The Inca Empire, flourishing in the Andes until the Spanish conquest, is regarded by archaeologists as the builder of the walls. Sacsayhuamán is thought to have been both a military stronghold and a ceremonial centre, perhaps serving as a backdrop for religious festivals that gathered thousands of people. Yet, despite the knowledge of Inca engineering techniques, the methods used to quarry, transport, and position the largest blocks remain debated. Simple tools of stone and bronze do not seem sufficient for shaping rocks of this magnitude with such flawless precision. One of the most puzzling aspects lies in the way the blocks interlock with irregular shapes that seem almost like pieces of a puzzle. Rather than cutting each stone into rectangles, builders shaped them into polygons with multiple angles, allowing them to slot together without gaps. This design added strength against earthquakes, yet it also raises questions about the extraordinary planning and craftsmanship required. Each stone appears unique, carved to fit perfectly with its neighbours, as though some hidden blueprint guided the entire construction. Legends passed down through Andean oral traditions add to the sense of mystery. Some stories claim that the stones moved themselves, guided by the chants of priests who commanded them into place. Others suggest that unknown forces helped the builders achieve what appeared impossible. While these accounts are often dismissed as folklore, they reflect the awe that the walls inspired not only in outsiders, but in those who inherited the legacy of the Inca. The origins of the stones have been linked by modern studies to quarries situated a few miles from the site. The sheer distance between quarry and plateau introduces further challenges. Moving blocks of this size across rugged Andean terrain without wheels or draft animals would have required immense organization, manpower, and ingenuity. Hypotheses include ramps, rollers, and ropes, yet none fully explain how stones weighing more than 100 tons were lifted and locked into walls that still stand centuries later. What deepens the enigma is that Sacsayhuamán represents only a fragment of a much larger complex. Historical accounts suggest the fortress once extended far beyond what remains, with towers, plazas, and storehouses that created a city within a city. Much of the original construction was dismantled after the conquest, as Spaniards used its stones to build churches and homes in Cusco. The walls that survive are merely the skeleton of something greater, hinting at an achievement that may never be fully reconstructed. Even now, no one can fully explain how the walls of Sacsayhuamán came to stand with such impossible perfection, leaving behind a silence that feels less like absence and more like a challenge waiting to be answered. Copper Scroll of Qumran. In a dimly lit chamber carved into the desert cliffs near the Dead Sea, a roll of metal unlike any other was found resting among fragments of ancient manuscripts. Unlike the fragile parchment and leather scrolls that made up the rest of the Dead Sea Scrolls, this one was hammered from sheets of copper, its surface hardened with age and corrosion, its words hidden until modern tools could peel them apart. The moment of its discovery, in 1952, instantly set it apart, for here was not just another religious or philosophical text, but something that looked more like a coded list. The material itself told a story before a single word could be read. Copper was not a medium chosen for ease or beauty. It was costly, heavy, and difficult to inscribe. Whoever created it must have wanted permanence, a record that could withstand centuries of decay. As scholars struggled to unroll its brittle surface without shattering it, they realized they were dealing with an object meant to outlast generations, as though its makers believed its contents were too vital to vanish with time. When the letters finally came into view, the mystery only deepened. Instead of hymns, laws, or visions of prophets, the scroll described hiding places of astonishing wealth. Line after line gave directions to locations, some near valleys, others near ruins, or under the steps of buildings, where gold, silver, and sacred objects were said to have been buried. If taken literally, the amounts were staggering, suggesting caches of treasure far beyond what most communities of the era could have ever possessed. The language of the scroll carried the plainness of an inventory, not the symbolism of myth. It spoke of measures, containers, and landmarks in a tone that felt practical, almost administrative. Yet the more archaeologists and historians examined it, the less certainty they found. No excavation at the listed sites produced the promised hoards. Some markers no longer existed, while others pointed to areas so vague that they could cover vast stretches of land. The scroll described riches with precision, but not in ways that yielded discovery. Those studying the scroll quickly began to ask who might have written such a document. One theory linked it to the Essenes, the sect believed to have lived at Qumran and authored many of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yet this idea sat uneasily beside the austere lifestyle, often attributed to them, for why would a community of simplicity catalogue treasures of unimaginable size? Another suggestion places its origin within the turmoil of the Jewish revolt against Rome, when sacred items from the Jerusalem temple may have been hidden away for safekeeping. The dating of the scroll, placed somewhere between the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, added weight to these speculations, but no clarity. If it truly referred to temple treasures, then it could represent the last trace of riches lost in the fires that consumed Jerusalem in 70 CE. But the possibility also arose that the scroll recorded nothing more than symbolic instructions, a spiritual map disguised as a list of wealth. Each explanation seemed possible, yet none could be proven. The technical challenges of reading the scroll added another layer of drama. Because the copper was brittle and fused, it had to be cut into sections before its text could be studied, an act that risked damaging the very artifact it sought to preserve. Even then, gaps and corrosion left some parts incomplete, and every missing fragment fueled further speculation. Were the lost words the key to the puzzle, or did they conceal even more mysteries than the lines that survived? Even under the scrutiny of advanced imaging, the scroll gives up new details while keeping its ultimate meaning just out of reach. Each new examination sharpens the writing, but does not untangle its meaning. The more clearly the words are read, the less certain their intent becomes, as if the scroll was crafted to provoke questions rather than deliver solutions. Over 70 years after its discovery, the copper scroll continues to occupy a strange space between history and legend. It is at once a document of remarkable concreteness and a riddle that refuses resolution. Scholars debate whether it points to treasures once real, treasures already looted, or treasures that never existed at all. In the end, the copper plates remain not just an artifact, but an invitation into a mystery, their words echoing with the possibility that something extraordinary still lies hidden beneath the desert earth. Longyou Caves. Carved entirely by hand, a silent network of chambers lies hidden beneath the hills of Zhejiang province in eastern China. Known as the Longyou Caves, they were first brought to light in 1992 when local villagers drained a pond and discovered the water concealed a vast hollow space below. As one cave after another was emptied, what emerged was not the work of nature, but of human design on a scale that defied expectation. Each cavern is immense, with ceilings that soar like the vaults of cathedrals and walls, covered in patterns of parallel lines etched with meticulous care. The marks are so uniform that they give the impression of intentional artistry rather than rough quarrying. In some caves, the walls form smooth angles and flat planes, while in others, towering pillars appear to hold up the stone roof, creating the atmosphere of an underground palace hidden from sight for centuries. The sheer size of the undertaking has puzzled every researcher who has studied it. More than 20 caves have been identified, each one cut from solid sandstone without any sign of collapse. Estimates suggest that millions of cubic meters of stone would have needed to be removed, all without leaving behind piles of debris or traces of where the material was carried. For a community in ancient times, such a project would have demanded a level of coordination and labour rarely seen in known records of the region. Although monumental in scale, the caves offer no inscriptions, statues, or artifacts to explain their purpose. They are empty chambers, silent and bare, with only the mysterious carvings on their walls hinting at the intentions of their builders. Unlike tombs, temples, or fortifications, the Longyou Caves contain no offerings or human remains, no evidence of habitation or ritual. Their emptiness raises the question of whether they were ever meant to be occupied at all. Determining the age of the caves has remained elusive. Some researchers suggest they may be over 2,000 years old, yet no historical texts mention such a construction. Chinese records are often detailed in describing grand works, but here the silence is complete, as though the caves were deliberately erased from memory or never acknowledged in the first place. Without written sources, archaeologists can only guess at the period in which they were created, leaving their true age in the shadows. The architectural features are equally confounding. The chiselling on the walls appears consistent across all the caves, suggesting they were built within a relatively short time frame and perhaps by a single culture or community. Yet no tools have been found to explain the precision of the cuts. The texture of the carved surfaces remains sharp even after centuries underwater, leading to questions about the techniques and endurance of the craftsmanship. Speculation about their purpose has produced many theories. Some believe the caves might have been quarries, though the effort to carve such smooth and ornate surfaces would be unnecessary if only stone was being extracted. Others suggest they were secret chambers for storing valuable goods, yet their scale far exceeds what would be needed for hidden vaults. A few even imagine they served as ceremonial spaces or places of gathering, though their silence offers no proof. Adding to the mystery is the engineering itself. The ceilings remain stable despite their vast span, showing no evidence of supports beyond the carved pillars. The sandstone should be prone to erosion, yet the structures have endured floods and centuries underwater without collapsing. This resilience suggests a deep understanding of rock stability, an expertise that appears advanced for the time in which they might have been built. Exploration of the caves has only deepened the mystery. Light reflects off the carved striations, casting shifting patterns that make the walls seem alive with movement. Walking through the chambers, visitors often describe a sense of deliberate design, as though the builders had an aesthetic vision as important as the function of the caves themselves. Yet, with no written guidance, the meaning of that vision is lost. In the present day, the Longyou Caves are still under examination, with researchers turning to technology that measures their dimensions and reveals clues to their construction. While the data confirms their astonishing scale and craftsmanship, it offers no definitive explanation. The questions of who built them, why they were created, and how such immense labor was organized remain unanswered. What lingers most is the silence, a silence not just of the caves themselves, but of history, which offers not a single clue to explain why so much effort was spent on creating chambers that now lie forgotten beneath the hills. Ubaid lizard figurines. In the dry soil of southern Mesopotamia, archaeologists uncovered small clay statues that seemed strangely out of place among the pottery and tools of the ancient Ubaid culture. These figures, dating back to around 4000 BCE, bore unmistakably human shapes, but with elongated heads, slanted eyes, and reptilian features that set them apart from anything else in the archaeological record. The first discoveries were met with curiosity, yet, as more figurines were unearthed, their oddity only deepened. Some of the figurines depict standing figures holding infants, their arms carefully shaped to cradle small bodies. Others show seated figures with patterned clothing etched into the clay, suggesting an attention to detail that hints at meaning beyond simple decoration. The elongated heads and large eyes appear intentional rather than accidental distortions, and their consistent presence across different sites suggests that these forms carried symbolic weight within the Ubaid world. More than their form, it is the context of their discovery that renders the figurines truly intriguing. Excavations at sites like Al-Ubaid revealed them within ordinary settlements, not grand temples or elite burials. They were discovered alongside everyday objects, suggesting they may have been woven into the rhythm of daily life rather than confined to formal ritual spaces. Yet the effort to craft such distinct figures points to a purpose beyond simple playthings or household ornaments. The Ubaid culture itself was a formative stage in Mesopotamian history, preceding the rise of the Sumerians and the development of writing. Known for building some of the earliest large villages, the Ubaid people established irrigation systems and cultivated fertile lands near the rivers. Their material culture, marked by painted pottery and communal architecture, reflects a society both practical and organized. Against this backdrop, the reptilian figurines stand out as symbols that resist easy interpretation. One theory suggests that the figurines represent deities or spirits important to the Ubaid belief systems. The reptilian traits may have symbolized fertility, transformation, or powers tied to water, given the culture's dependence on rivers and irrigation. The presence of figures holding infants supports the idea of a fertility connection, perhaps embodying protective or maternal qualities within a spiritual framework. Other scholars argue that the figures may have carried social or political significance. The careful patterns on their clothing could reflect status markers or community roles, preserved in clay as a way to honor or record certain individuals. In this view, the unusual facial features might not have been literal depictions, but symbolic representations designed to distinguish them from ordinary people. The lack of inscriptions leaves these interpretations open-ended. Unlike later Mesopotamian cultures, the Ubaid left behind no written texts to explain their rituals or beliefs. This silence forces archaeologists to rely solely on the material evidence, comparing the figurines to other ancient symbols without the guidance of words. Every theory remains speculative, balanced between cultural possibility and unanswered questions. The craftsmanship of the figurines adds another layer of mystery. Each one is relatively small, yet shaped with care, its surface smoothed and sometimes decorated with incised lines. The consistency of their reptilian features across different finds suggests a shared idea or tradition rather than individual artistic whim. This level of uniformity points to a belief or custom widely recognized among Ubaid communities. Public fascination with the figurines has fueled interpretations that stretch far beyond archaeology. Some claim they are evidence of mythological beings, while others tie them to speculative ideas about extraterrestrial visitors. While such notions lie outside scholarly consensus, they reveal how unsettling the figurines appear when measured against expectations of early human art. Their strangeness invites imaginative responses, whether grounded in cultural symbolism or in modern storytelling. Archaeologists continue to return to the figurines with fresh methods of analysis. Advances in microscopic study allow for closer examination of tool marks and surface wear, while contextual studies seek to understand how the figurines fit into broader patterns of Ubaid life. Each discovery adds details, but rarely reduces the mystery, as the reptilian faces stare back with the same enigmatic expressions they carried thousands of years ago. In the end, the Ubaid lizard figurines remain as silent witnesses to a belief system we cannot fully reconstruct. They offer glimpses of a worldview where human and reptilian traits merged in clay, where infants were cradled by beings with slanted eyes, and where meaning was preserved without words. Even today, those staring figures seem to guard a secret, one that may never be spoken but lingers in the clay forms left behind in the sands of Mesopotamia. Carnac stones. The countryside of Brittany, in northwestern France, holds one of the most striking landscapes of ancient Europe. Stretching across fields near the town of Carnac are thousands of standing stones, each carefully placed in long, parallel rows that seem to ripple across the land like frozen waves of stone. From a distance, they appear almost natural, as if the earth itself had pushed them upward, but their deliberate arrangement tells another story, one of human effort and purpose that remains elusive. Closer inspection reveals not just the scale, but the precision of this vast site. Some stones rise as high as a house, while others are only waist high, yet they are positioned with such order that the lines run unbroken for hundreds of meters. These formations, known as alignments, are not the result of random placement. They suggest intention, planning, and an understanding of the landscape that has puzzled researchers for generations. The sheer labor involved adds another layer of mystery. Many of the stones weigh several tons, and yet they were quarried, shaped, and transported without the benefit of wheels or metal tools. Some of the largest stones are believed to have been hauled from quarries miles away, raising further questions about the methods of transport and the level of organization within these early communities. The people who achieved this feat lived more than 6,000 years ago, during a time when communities were small and resources were limited. What could have driven them to devote such immense effort to creating a monument of this scale? Local legends provide their own explanations. For centuries, villagers told stories that the stones were once an army turned to stone by Merlin, the wizard of Arthurian tales. Others believed they held protective power, watching over the land and its people. While such tales belong to folklore rather than history, they reveal how deeply the stones have shaped the imagination of those who lived alongside them. When archaeologists began to study the site in earnest during the 19th century, they brought new questions. Some suggested the stones marked burial grounds, though few graves have been found among them. Others proposed that they formed a kind of calendar, aligned with the movements of the sun and moon, allowing ancient people to track seasons and harvest times. Evidence of astronomical alignments does exist, but it remains unclear whether this was the builders' true purpose, or only a part of it. Excavations around the Carnac area have uncovered traces of Neolithic life, pottery fragments, tools made from stone, and remnants of dwellings. These finds help place the stones in their cultural context, but they do not explain the meaning behind the massive alignments. Unlike other megalithic sites that contain carvings or symbols offering hints, the Carnac stones stand mute, their surfaces largely bare, as if the builders wanted the stones themselves to be the message. Even the passage of time has done little to lessen the enigma. Records from the 17th century describe some stones being taken and repurposed for building houses and roads, yet the vast majority endured, hinting at the scale of the original complex. Despite centuries of farming, development, and natural erosion, the alignments remain remarkably intact. Their endurance makes them feel less like relics of a vanished culture and more like guardians of a secret that refuses to fade. For every theory proposed, from ritual processions to ceremonial gathering places, there is always another question left unanswered. Walking among the stones today, one feels both awe and unease. The rows stretch on in silence, evoking the sense that they once guided or observed something no longer present. The effort required to place each stone so carefully suggests an importance we can only guess at. It is this gulf between the certainty of the stone's existence and the uncertainty of their purpose that gives Carnac its haunting power. Perhaps that is why the stones continue to draw people from across the world. They stand as a reminder that even in a modern age of science and discovery, there remain places where human determination and mystery intertwine. No matter how many theories arise, the fields of Carnac seem to hold back the final answer, leaving us to wonder at the vision of the people who built them. The rows of stone still wait in silence, carrying a purpose that time has never revealed. Olmec colossal heads, massive stone faces peer out from the earth of southern Mexico, their expressions frozen in stern concentration. Each one towers over those who stand before it, carved with such precision that the contours of lips, eyes, and helmets seem almost lifelike. To stumble upon them in the tropical lowlands is to feel as if giants from another age still linger among the trees. The first of these heads came to wider attention in the 19th century, when travelers reported strange stone monuments near the modern-day state of Veracruz. Local communities had long been aware of them, though outsiders were stunned by their sheer size. Later excavations revealed that these were not isolated statues, but part of a larger cultural landscape tied to the Olmec civilization, which thrived between 1200 and 400 BCE. Rising as high as 3 meters and weighing up to 40 tons, the colossal heads were carved from volcanic basalt. What makes their presence all the more astonishing is that the stone did not come from the coastal plains where it now rests. Instead, quarries have been identified over 50 miles away in the Tuxtla Mountains. The effort required to move such immense blocks without wheels or pack animals suggests an advanced social structure capable of organizing immense labor forces. Each face bears unique features, as though they were portraits of individuals rather than generalized forms. Some have broad noses, others thinner lips or more rounded cheeks, and all wear helmet-like headgear that hints at roles in warfare or ceremonial ball games. Scholars have debated whether these represent rulers, warriors, or revered ancestors, but no written records survive to confirm their identities. What remains clear is that the artistry captures a powerful sense of authority and presence. At the great Olmec centers of San Lorenzo and La Venta, archaeologists uncovered the colossal heads arranged in deliberate positions. These were not scattered haphazardly, but placed with apparent care, sometimes overlooking plazas or facing outward towards surrounding lands. The positioning has led some to suggest they were meant to watch over their people or assert dominance against rival groups. Whatever their original purpose, their deliberate placement shows a cultural significance that went beyond mere artistry. Close examination reveals a sophisticated technique in the carving. The basalt was shaped with stone tools, each stroke leaving fine marks that remain visible even after thousands of years. The level of detail is remarkable considering the hardness of the material and the lack of metal chisels. From the curve of an ear to the subtle lines around the mouth, the sculptors demonstrated both patience and vision. The logistics of moving and erecting these stones remain one of the greatest puzzles. Without wheels or beasts of burden, theories suggest the blocks were dragged on sledges over logs or floated on rafts along rivers. Yet the terrain between the Tuxtla Mountains and Olmec sites is rugged, filled with marshes and uneven ground, making such feats almost unimaginable. The fact that dozens of these monuments were transported suggests a mastery of engineering that is difficult to reconcile with what is otherwise known of the era. The colossal heads also open questions about identity and representation in Olmec culture. Were these sculptures intended as lasting monuments to specific rulers, preserving their likenesses for future generations? Or were they symbolic guardians, embodying a collective power rather than individual names? Without inscriptions, researchers are left to interpret the silent faces and their enduring expressions. Discoveries of buried heads add another layer to the mystery. Some were intentionally covered or relocated in antiquity, as though their presence had shifted meaning or required concealment. This deliberate burial has been interpreted as ritual closure, perhaps marking the end of a dynasty or the abandonment of a site. The act itself shows that the heads were not static objects, but part of an evolving cultural practice. Ongoing excavations reveal more details, yet the colossal heads still defy simple explanation. They demonstrate a scale of organization, artistry, and ambition that challenges assumptions about early Mesoamerican societies. While the Olmecs left behind no codices or written chronicles, these stone faces speak across the millennia, their silence perhaps more haunting than words could ever be. Standing before them today, one cannot help but feel the weight of questions left unanswered, as if the stone itself guards a story that will never be fully told. Nebra Sky Disc. A patch of forested land near Nebra, Germany, hides an object that has changed the way we think about early European societies. Unearthed not in a formal excavation, but by looters in 1999, the discovery at first seemed almost too extraordinary to be real. From the soil emerged a circular bronze disc, weathered green by age, yet adorned with shimmering gold symbols arranged with startling precision. The disc measures about 30 centimeters across, small enough to be held in two hands, yet powerful enough to alter entire narratives of prehistory. Its surface carries images of the sun, a crescent moon, and a cluster of stars that scholars identify as the Pleiades. At the edges lie arcs of gold that appear to mark solstices, suggesting that the object was more than an ornament. It may have been a tool for observing the heavens, making it the oldest known representation of the cosmos in Europe. What gives the find its greater impact is the context in which it was uncovered. Alongside the disc were two bronze swords, axes, and bracelets, buried on a hillside known as Mittelberg. The combination of weapons and celestial imagery raises questions about the relationship between power on Earth and authority drawn from the skies. Whoever placed these items together did so deliberately, perhaps marking a ritual or a sacred offering. Archaeologists have noted that this type of deliberate deposition mirrors practices found in other Bronze Age hoards across Europe, yet the presence of a cosmic map among weapons makes the Nebra burial uniquely enigmatic. Scientific analysis dates the Nebra Sky Disc to around 1600 BCE, placing it in the Bronze Age. Before its discovery, scholars often assumed that astronomical knowledge in Europe at this time was limited, passed on through oral tradition rather than material objects. Yet, the disc reveals a sophisticated understanding of celestial cycles. The alignment of its golden arcs, with sunrise and sunset points on the horizon, suggests that its makers knew how to track the solar year with remarkable accuracy. The gold used in the decoration tells its own story. Isotope studies show that it came not from local deposits, but from sources in Cornwall, hundreds of miles away. This detail points to far-reaching trade networks and cultural connections stretching across Europe. The disc is not only an astronomical artifact, but also evidence of exchange between distant communities, bound together by shared knowledge and materials. For many archaeologists, the most tantalizing aspect is what the disc says about belief. Was it a priestly tool for determining the timing of festivals and harvests, or a sacred object imbued with divine meaning? Its careful burial suggests reverence, as though it was too powerful to remain in daily use. The placement on Mittelberg, a hill with wide views of the horizon, reinforces the idea that sky and earth were linked in ritual practice. The story of its discovery is almost as dramatic as the object itself. The looters who unearthed it attempted to sell it on the black market, leading to a series of secretive exchanges before it was seized by police in 2002. Only after years of legal battles and expert analysis was its authenticity fully accepted. That turbulent history of theft and recovery now forms part of its aura, adding to the sense that this artifact was never meant to be easily held. Though examined for years, the subject still leaves researchers with unresolved questions. The arrangement of symbols may not be purely astronomical, but could encode mythological ideas lost to time. Some researchers argue that the disc represents not just the mechanics of the heavens, but a worldview in which cosmic order gave legitimacy to earthly rule. Others suggest that its imagery blends different traditions, a sign of cultural fusion at a time when societies across Europe were in contact. As it rests today in the State Museum of Prehistory in Halle, the Nebra Sky Disc continues to draw visitors who stand quietly before it, captivated by the way its golden forms gleam against ancient bronze. It is both art and instrument, science and mystery, preserved against all odds for more than 3,000 years. Yet even with careful study, the disc does not surrender its secrets easily, leaving us to wonder if we are only glimpsing fragments of a much larger story written in the stars. Derinkuyu, underground city. During a renovation in 1963, workers in Cappadocia, Turkey, uncovered a hidden entrance that opened onto one of the most astonishing archaeological finds ever made. A resident, breaking down a wall in his home, stumbled upon a tunnel that led not just to a cellar, but to a vast network of chambers stretching deep underground. What began as a simple household repair quickly unfolded into the unearthing of Derinkuyu, an underground city of immense scale and mystery. Descending into its passages, explorers found that the city extended through multiple levels, plunging more than 250 feet beneath the earth. Carved directly into the soft volcanic rock, the labyrinth sprawled into a bewildering array of corridors, living quarters, storage rooms, kitchens, stables, and even places of worship. The precision of its design, with ventilation shafts providing air and stone doors that could seal entire passages, suggested an engineering vision that went far beyond mere survival. The deeper researchers went, the more elaborate the underground landscape became. Certain levels revealed wells that provided fresh water, cleverly isolated from potential contamination above. Communal spaces suggested areas where people could gather, while niches carved into the walls hinted at daily activities that once filled these silent halls. Each chamber seemed to whisper of a society that had not only adapted to the underground, but thrived within it. Historical accounts suggest that the earliest layers of the city may date back as far as the first millennium BCE, though its expansions likely continued through Byzantine times. Over centuries, the city seems to have been used as a place of refuge, protecting its inhabitants from raids, invasions, and religious persecution. With space for tens of thousands of people, along with their livestock and provisions, Derinkuyu was less a hiding place and more a fully functioning settlement beneath the surface of the earth. The city's defensive design stands out as one of its most remarkable features. Circular stone doors, some weighing more than half a ton, could be rolled across narrow corridors to block intruders. From these points, hidden shafts allowed defenders to strike at attackers who dared to force their way inside. Every detail suggested not only protection but also foresight, as though the builders expected to withstand prolonged threats from the world above. Equally fascinating are the passages that extend far beyond Derinkuyu itself. Archaeologists have uncovered long tunnels believed to connect with other underground complexes miles away, forming an immense network beneath the Cappadocian landscape. If linked, this would mean that thousands of people across the region could move, hide, and communicate entirely out of sight. Such planning hints at a level of organization and cooperation not usually attributed to ancient communities in this region. Religious spaces add another dimension to the city's enigma. Among the chambers, archaeologists identified what appears to be a large church with a vaulted ceiling, along with smaller chapels scattered through different levels. Their presence suggests that spiritual life was not abandoned even when entire populations took shelter underground. The blending of daily necessity with sacred practice deepens the sense that this city was not only defensive, but also cultural and communal in purpose. Who conceived and built Derinkuyu remains unknown, a question that decades of study have failed to resolve. The volcanic tuff of Cappadocia is relatively easy to carve, yet the sheer scale of excavation, engineering, and maintenance required pushes the limits of what is thought possible for early builders. Without clear written records, the origin of the city hovers in uncertainty, leaving only the carved walls and vast chambers to speak for themselves. Walking today through its silent corridors, lit only by dim lamps, visitors sense both the ingenuity and the unease that once defined this underground refuge. The smooth walls and towering shafts suggest a mastery of stonework, yet the heavy stone doors and hidden traps speak of fear and the constant threat of danger. Each turn in the maze raises new questions about who lived here, what they feared, and how such a marvel could have been constructed in near secrecy. What endures is the silence of Derinkuyu itself, a city without a recorded founder, where the voices of those who once crowded its halls have long since faded, leaving only the dark passageways that hint at secrets still buried deep within the earth. Unfinished obelisk. In the granite quarries of Aswan, where the desert sun scorches bare rock and dust lingers in the air, lies a massive monument that was never completed. Carved directly from the bedrock, the unfinished obelisk stretches nearly 42 meters in length, dwarfing anything that stands nearby. Had it been finished and raised, it would have been the largest known obelisk of ancient Egypt, weighing an estimated 200 tons. Yet it remains fused to the ground, locked forever in its half-made state, as if frozen in time by some forgotten force. Unlike finished monuments that conceal their methods, the discovery of this colossal work offers a rare glimpse into the process of ancient construction. Most obelisks that stand in temples or city squares give no hint of how they were carved, shaped, and moved into place. Here, however, tool marks run along the sides, and channels carved around its base reveal how stonemasons slowly freed these immense shafts from the bedrock. To stand beside it is to witness an ancient workshop left exactly as its workers abandoned it. Why the project was halted has long been debated by archaeologists. The most visible clue is a network of cracks running through the stone. At some stage during the carving, the granite began to split, making it impossible to lift the piece as a single unit. The workers seem to have recognized the flaw too late, abandoning years of labor in an instant. Yet questions remain. Were the cracks caused by natural weaknesses in the stone, or by stresses introduced during quarrying? Looking closer at the unfinished monument, one can see details that reveal the ambitions of its builders. The sheer size suggests it was meant for a ruler of extraordinary power, perhaps Hatshepsut, whose reign in the 15th century BCE saw the construction of grand monuments and temples. If completed, this obelisk would have surpassed all others in scale, standing as a visible marker of authority that could be seen for miles across the Nile Valley. The unfinished state also raises deeper mysteries about engineering in ancient Egypt. Even smaller obelisks, weighing hundreds of tons, required ingenious methods to move from the quarry to the river and then to their final locations. The logistics of transporting the unfinished obelisk, more than 1,000 tons of solid granite, push the limits of what seems possible with ropes, sledges, and manpower alone. The fact that such a project was even attempted suggests that the Egyptians possessed techniques or levels of organization that remain partly hidden from us. Beyond the practical questions lies the symbolic weight of the obelisk itself. These towering pillars, often placed in pairs at temple entrances, were sacred to the sun god Ra. Their pointed tops, called pyramidia, were gilded to catch the light, making them blaze at dawn and dusk. In this context, the unfinished obelisk was not just a monument of stone, but a bridge between earth and sky, a symbol of divine connection left incomplete. The quarry in Aswan still carries the echoes of the workers who once laboured there. Shallow trenches carved into the rock show, where fires may have been lit to heat and fracture the granite, and scattered fragments suggest tools made of harder stone or copper alloys. Walking through the site, it is possible to imagine the sound of chisels striking, the heat of the fires, and the voices of workers coordinating their efforts. The sudden abandonment of the site leaves an eerie silence, as though the labour stopped overnight. The haunting power of the unfinished obelisk lies in how much it reveals precisely by never having been completed. Unlike polished monuments that erase the struggle of their making, this giant shows the raw, difficult steps of creation. It is at once a record of ambition and a reminder of failure, a monument not to triumph but to limits encountered and never overcome. The longer one lingers at the site, the more unsettling the questions become. Did the Egyptians truly believe they could raise such a monument, or was it an experiment that collapsed under its own impossibility? Were there techniques lost to time that might explain how they intended to shift such weight, or was this the moment their methods finally met their boundary? The stone holds no answers, only the marks of abandoned effort. Silent and immovable, the immense block keeps its secrets, while the knowledge of those who abandoned the quarry has slipped forever into the past. Stone spheres of Costa Rica. In the far south of Costa Rica, where jungle once covered nearly every patch of ground, strange stone shapes emerged as the forests were cut back for banana plantations. Workers clearing the land in the 1930s found their tools striking against something impossibly smooth beneath the soil. What surfaced was not the rough edge of a boulder, but the curve of a perfect sphere, silent and solid, resting in the earth as though it had been waiting to be uncovered. Word of these discoveries spread quickly through the region, and before long dozens of the rounded stones had been unearthed. Some were no bigger than a football, small enough to be carried by a single person, while others measured over 2 meters across and weighed several tons. Some of the largest spheres show subtle patterns etched into their surfaces, faint lines that could have been symbolic or decorative, hinting at meanings now lost. The precision of their shape was startling. Even in places where the rainforest canopy hung heavy with vines and roots, the surfaces of the spheres remained surprisingly even, as if carved with careful attention rather than formed by chance. The material chosen for these objects deepened the mystery. Many of the spheres were made from gabbro, a hard, igneous rock that is difficult to work with without using advanced tools. Others were fashioned from limestone or sandstone, yet the smoothness remained consistent. Researchers noted that shaping such stones with the technology known to have existed in the region would have required enormous effort, suggesting that whoever made them invested great labour in achieving such near-perfect roundness. Archaeologists traced their origins to the Diquis culture, a pre-Columbian society that flourished in the area centuries before the arrival of Europeans. While pottery, goldwork, and burial sites gave some clues to their way of life, the purpose of the spheres remained elusive. Unlike functional tools or weapons, the stones offered no practical use. Instead, they seemed to carry a symbolic or ceremonial role, standing as markers of meaning rather than instruments of survival. Their placement across the landscape added to the enigma. Some spheres were found clustered together in groups, aligned in straight rows or geometric patterns, while others appeared isolated, positioned at the edges of ancient settlements. Occasionally, a sphere is discovered, partially buried in alignment with nearby rivers, suggesting a deliberate connection to the natural landscape. A few seem deliberately set near burial grounds or along pathways, hinting that they may have guided rituals, defined boundaries, or represented cosmological ideas now lost to time. Accounts from the mid-20th century tell of spheres being moved, broken, or even dynamited by those hoping to find gold hidden inside. Many of these efforts left irreparable damage, erasing clues about how they had originally been arranged. Yet, even in their displaced state, the stones carried a presence that resisted explanation. They were too carefully made to be dismissed as decoration, too enduring to be accidental. The sheer number of spheres scattered across the southern region made it clear they were not isolated creations. More than 300 have been documented, spread across fields, riverbanks, and former village sites. Their uniformity of style suggested a shared cultural significance, but, without written records, interpretations remained speculative. The silence of the stones themselves offered no guidance, only their unchanging form against the passing of centuries. Modern researchers have proposed theories ranging from astronomical alignment to symbols of social status. Some suggest the spheres represented the sun, embodying cycles of time and cosmic order. Others see them as markers of power, displayed by leaders to affirm authority. Yet none of these ideas can be confirmed, and each new excavation only reinforces the sense that a larger pattern remains hidden beneath the surface. Today, many of the spheres stand in public spaces, preserved in museums or left in gardens and town squares. Tourists walk among them, tracing their smooth surfaces with their hands, just as plantation workers first did nearly a century ago. Their roundness still stirs questions, for it is hard not to wonder what compelled an ancient culture to dedicate such care to shaping stone into forms so precise and enduring. Untouched and enigmatic, the spheres of Costa Rica keep their secrets, defying every excavation that has tried to uncover them.